Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with you. One of the challenges sometimes of different platforms is, like we decided to do this as a webinar because we had so many people register. But, we don't get to see you, all of you, and that's a little bit of a loss. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I want to thank you for being here. My name is Victoria Santos. I use she, her pronouns. I want to thank all of my friends and my new friends, my brothers, my sisters, my uncles and grandparents, and all of my relations that are here. Thank you all who have chosen to come this afternoon, this morning, this evening for some of you to share in this conversation with our amazing panels. On behalf of Edwin, Cleopas, and myself, I want to express our deep gratitude. I want to take a moment and acknowledge the territory and the land that I'm in, and I also invite you to spend some time acknowledging the land in which you are. So I'm going to read a statement, and please take that statement and interpret it for the place where you are currently inhabiting. Here we go. I want to acknowledge and recognize our native people of this land, both past and present, those who were original steward of this land before colonization. And we give our respect for the enduring relationship between all Indigenous people in their traditional territories, for the practice and spiritualities that are tied to this land and on which we work and live. We acknowledge their suffering, the land theft, the genocide, and we honor with gratitude this land itself and the original people. We also recognize and acknowledge the labor with which this country, the US, particularly was built on the labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the US from the continent of Africa. And we recognize the continuous contribution of all of the ancestors and survivors. We also acknowledge all the immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented people who contributed to the building of this country and continue to serve within our labor force. We acknowledge all paid caregiving labor. We also acknowledge the trauma both experienced and witnessed of all Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and our enduring spirit, as well as our resilience. I want to thank you as a Latin American, Caribbean, immigrant, cisgender presenting woman. I want to thank all of you, beautiful human, for dedicating your life for the service of humanity. I want to thank these amazing, amazing panels that take on so much of our projection in the service of humanity, in the service of healing this deep wound of colonization that travels throughout the planet like a hungry ghost, eating and destroying and cannibalizing the land, the wind, the water, the plants, the animals, and our bodies. I want to thank all of you who have joined for donating your time to being here with us. On behalf of the Center for Healing and Liberation and on behalf of the Social Justice Center, I will tell you that the Center for Healing and Liberation is committed to transforming this legacy of white supremacy and cannibalization, and creating a space for Black, Indigenous, and people of color to thrive, and for everyone to thrive, because no one is free until we are all free. I want to turn it over to my colleague, Edwin, so he can introduce himself and his center.
Thank you for that, Victoria. Good evening, everybody. Evening because it's nighttime in South Africa. I come from Cape Town, the city called Cape Town, and I represent the Social Justice Agency. I am a director at the company. And the song that we opened up with was a very beautiful song. It was one of our local languages that was used, which is Xhosa. That's the clicks that you heard in it. And it was a song that was dedicated to some of our struggle heroes who fought for our freedom. And specifically, the song is dedicated to one of our young leaders who was killed at a very, very young age, which is Solomon Maslangu. And he said before they killed him that his blood will nourish the trees that will fight the struggle to liberate his people. And so we stand today, a free people, unfortunately still oppressed by white supremacy. And this is what the Social Justice Agency is all about. As some of you might know, South Africa is the most unequal country in the world in terms of economics. Um, our unemployment rate is beyond just under 40%. And this is largely black people in South Africa. You might understand that we have a population of 90% black and only 10% of white people, or less than 10%. And yet the economic power and the oppressive power still resides within the hands of white people in South Africa. Therefore, we as the Social Justice Agency, we look towards poverty alleviation, economic empowerment of black people, racial awareness amongst white people who still live ignorantly, enjoying their white privilege, and then educating the masses, because education, we believe, is the power to upliftment and to economic empowerment for South Africans. And we use tools, for example, such as psychometric assessments, vocational training, diversity, inclusion, equity, and transformation training. And we do that through workshops. And then we also use study methods in order to train our young children at school in order for them to do better. Our predominantly black impoverished areas, our children lacks heavily in the balance between haves and have-nots in terms of schooling, and therefore we empower them, because that's how we alleviate poverty, by helping the children to do better in future. They can uplift their families in the future. So thank you very much for everybody contributing to tonight, because it is in essence uh, to help these children and to help people in South Africa. So we salute you from Africa.
I think I'm supposed to go next, right, Victoria?
Yeah,
Victoria
no,
is
hold
going
on.
next.
My hold on. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Woo, thank you, Edwin. That was wonderful. And thank you for sharing about the song. It's such a beautiful expression of the struggle in South Africa. And I'm definitely, knowing that just recently, the fighting that broke out and just the struggle in South Africa continues. So thank you so much for sharing, as it continues throughout the world, right?
Yes, yes.
And that's why we're here. I want to offer now an introduction, just a very brief introduction to an amazing woman, Leticia Nieto. Leticia, actually, I've been very privileged to be studying with her over the past 6 months in these beautiful courses that she's been teaching, and where she really brings all of her skills and all of her knowledge to bear in terms of helping us to be freer in our own life, so that we can be liberated. And that is what her work, her art, her singing, that's what it's about. And so, Leticia, I want to turn it over to you, my dear sister, and deep, deep gratitude and a bow.
Thank you, Victoria. So I am going to invite Brother Resmaa Menakem to join me on the screen as I introduce you to him, if you do not know him. So I am so honored to introduce Resmaa Menakem, author of the New York Times bestseller, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and our bodies. And I am so looking forward to the new book, The Quaking of America, an embodied guide to navigating our nation's upheaval and racial reckoning, which we will be able to access in April of 22. He has also given us, for those who might not be aware, 101 Tips for Emerging Justice Leaders and Rock the Boat, a relational book about conflict. So Resmaa is a leading voice in deepening the conversation on racialized trauma and cultural maturity. He is a therapist, a trauma specialist, a justice leadership coach, organizational strategist, and a master trainer. But what I most want you to know is that his awareness about how trauma starts and lives and takes hold in the body, and how that is where the healing needs to go, is a unique and unusual orientation because it is profoundly compassionate and self-compassionate. So I want to say that this need of addressing trauma from the core, from the body, from the beginning, from the root, from the historical to the present, is what somatic abolitionist orientation brings us. And that is an individual and communal path to build endurance, stamina, and discernment towards freedom. And it has forever changed all manner of civil unrest, organizational change, community building, and mental health and community healing in the US and beyond. So please welcome Resmaa to introduce us to someone else.
Thank you, Leticia. I appreciate you. Made me sound like I was somebody, so I really appreciate that. I think you know, I think we started developing a relationship maybe about 3 years ago. And it has been so sustaining to me to be in relationship with you, as well as the other people on this panel. This work is profoundly weathering. It weathers us. And if we don't do it in the context of community, we don't last long in this. And I think one of the reasons why I've been able to stick around is because of people like you, and the next person that I think I think I'm supposed to introduce Robin, right? Yeah. Okay. So, I've known Robin now for I think 5 years. And I think the beautiful thing about our relationship is that it ain't storybook. I think this work people want, clean and storied and and happily ever after. And I think one of the things that I've appreciated about Robin is that she stuck in there with me. I've stuck in there with her. We've ground together. We've debated together. We've cared for each other. We've loved each other. All that different type of stuff. We've checked in on each other. And I think what's important about this work and what I appreciate about Robin is that she don't act like typical white folks. She don't act like she know everything and that's it. Like she got it, that's it. Nobody, everybody got to come to her and bend at the knees. And so I've just appreciated being around her. And if y'all don't know, Robin wrote White Fragility. It's like the white people's Bible now, and the white collective people's Bible. But I think more than anything, I just find Robin to be just a genuine person, and somebody that is willing to kind of work with specifically me. And so I just appreciate you. And so I'd like to introduce Robin DiAngelo. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Resmaa, you were saying that Leticia made you feel like you're somebody. And what just happened for me is that you moved me from my head to my heart. And I feel very open and very honored, and have a deep love for you and the way you have stood by me through some really rough times, if you will. I have the honor of introducing Nova Reed, and there is a connection between Resmaa and Nova and I. And I'll just start with her bio, and then I want to tell what personally resonates for me. So she's often described as a force to be reckoned with. She's an activist, a TED speaker. Check out her TED Talk. She's an author. Her brand new book, The Good Ally, look right here. Good Ally, a guided anti-racism journey from bystander to change maker. There it is. She's been awarded a Social Impact Award at the Precious Awards for her work in racial justice. She runs an online anti-racism academy in the UK. And regularly appears on BBC News, Sky News, BBC Radio as a media expert on race. My publicist in the UK reached out to Nova and I think offered for us to speak together. And Nova reached out to Resmaa and said, I need you to, give me the bona fides on this person. And I think that's really important because for white people listening, it speaks to a common expectation for white people that we will automatically be trusted unless we show different, as opposed to no, there's a history of harm between our groups. And it is a wise and safe assumption not to automatically give me the benefit of the doubt, but have me show you that you can do that. So she checked in with Resmaa. I'm pleased to say Resmaa gave me the thumbs up. We had a beautiful connection. And while she is very clear and very firm in her work on allyship, she's also clearly compassionate. She wants us to bridge these divides. And she's committed to having us do that. So I'm so honored to have you in my life now, Nova.
Thank you very much, Robin, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you.
So I think we'll get started. Yeah.
Yep.
And I will invite us to open with a song, which is my way of going about things. So I'm going to put this in the chat, and I'm just going to make a request that I be able to share screen in a bit, in case that's not been arranged, but I think it has. And this is the song we will sing. Let me send it to everyone. All right. This is by Lou Aya of the Peace Poets, and I'm going to do it 2 lines. So I'll sing it in Spanish, and it's the same melody for the English. So see if you can jump in, but I will ask that you close your mics because otherwise we'll get cacophony. So Robin, if you can close your mic as well, that'd be sweet. All right, here we go. Unless you want to sing the English part. No, okay. Here we go. Es el momento. This is the moment. Suelta lo que cargas. Put down what you're holding. Todo está cambiando. Everything is changing. Oye el viento hablar. Listen to the wind. Y si lo escuchas, and when you hear it, no hay por qué temerlo. You don't have to fear it. Sana todo aquello. Now's the time for healing. Que has podido amar everything you love. All right, as I said, Lou Aya. I am here as a person born and raised in southern central Mexico, in the state of Puebla, in the city of Puebla, Puebla de Los Ángeles, the original LA, or Población de la Reina de Los Ángeles, which is the full title of also the other LA. My people are also from Veracruz, Tabasco, and I am here to talk about and to anchor us into the blessing and curse of mestizaje, or mixing. As a Mexican person, and all Mexicans, we have this divergent ancestry that braids European, Spanish, African, and indigenous blood from the very start of this mestizaje story. I grew up with the experience of skin tone and skin color ranging from black to white, often within the same family. So I'm going to open up a photograph of some relatives, and I just want to show you some of my folks for a second. Can you see this picture? This is my grandmother, Deborah, my uncle Odilon, my aunt Luchita, my uncle Conrado. I can't remember if that's Conrado or Leobardo. There were 11 of them to start with. So the range of skin color is really significant inside of families. For a long time, I was the lightest skin, and that carried all kinds of confusing messages. And then I am no longer that, and that's also interesting. So the question of racialization is so intimate because it plays out as soon as a baby is born and commentary is offered about the lightness or darkness, the degree of indigeneity, the invisibilization of any kind of blackness. Even when blackness is quite visible, it is invisibilized. So 53% of people in Mexico identify as mestizo or mixed race and not as indigenous or black or white. Inequality for the longest time has been viewed as a problem related to ethnicity or particular tribal ancestry or socioeconomic class, and not to racialization. And that is a story that we tell in Mexico because the reality is that darker skin is strongly associated with decreased wealth, less schooling, and lived experience. So people with lighter skin complete more years of schooling than those with browner or darker skin, 10 years versus 6.5 years. That's a 45% gap in educational achievement. Social class absolutely correlates to skin color. Darker skinned citizens earn 41.5% less than lighter skinned. 2.5% of light skinned Mexicans don't have running water, compared to 11% of Mexicans with dark skin. And so there is a mythology that Mexicans do not perceive skin color as a meaningful source of prejudice or other meaning compared to things like age or gender or social class. But this relates to the conditioning around mestizaje and mixed race identity, which carries some blessing, but it is also a profound curse, inoculating everybody away from the realization of racialization and its impacts. And it's a very amazing cloak for white supremacy to continue to operate year after year, decade after decade, century after century. So that's my intro into this space and my invitation for us to begin to tell all the truth we can and win.
Thank you for that, Leticia. And I feel so moved to speak to that because what you're explaining is something that we struggle with as well in South Africa. So to give you an idea of our makeup, we had where in the US you had segregation. In South Africa we had apartheid. So it worked exactly on the same basis, and people were divided amongst four main groups that we had in South Africa, which is the white group, the black group, Indians, and then coloreds. And I belong to the colored group. And colored is not mixed race, but we are indigenous to Africa, and our heritage are the Khoisan people. And it's very difficult for us to get away from the oppression, colonization, and apartheid. And the difficult thing is we also have in our family different shades of people because we are mixed in and amongst everybody in this country. So you have very dark in my family to where I am one of the lightest in the family. But our heritage are all connected, interconnected with one another. And I think when we came together on this topic of speaking about racism and the global understanding of white supremacy, I think what is interesting for me to share in terms of the country that I come from is in South Africa, we have less than 10% of the population, as I mentioned earlier, are made up of white people. And yet they still hold the economic power to oppress the Black people in South Africa. More than 60% of Black people in South Africa lives in abject poverty and are still oppressed and still have to deal with white supremacy every single day of their lives. And I think when people hear that we are 90% Black in this country, you would think that we would have the ability to deal with this thing called racism in a quick fashion. You know, we've had democracy for over 28 years, and yet we are still struggling with the same difficulties that have been plaguing this country for hundreds of years. And I think one of the biggest things that I want to speak to tonight and want to gain some insights into in terms of how we can learn as South Africa is specifically on how we
You
deal
gonna
with
sit over there?
trauma,
Okay.
because that is something that we struggle with significantly, is the trauma that our people live with, because we don't have the opportunities or the facilities or the opportunity to deal with the trauma from our past. And so we have to try and deal with new issues that we're facing when we have never ever had an opportunity to deal with trauma. And then there is the stigma in South Africa that is still prohibiting people of color to speak to healers and psychologists and people in that fraternity. So I hope that gives you a good insight of what we bring to the table from South Africa's side. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone, Resmaa, Robin, Nova, any of you want to jump in on there?
I'm gonna hold off for a second. You can go ahead, Sis Nova.
Okay. Hi everyone. Pleasure to be with you all. I am here because I come from a UK lens, the original colonizers, and I've come today because we British people are really good at hiding their racism. We're really good at saying it's worse over there, shine your spotlight over there in the US. Mm-hmm. And we do this very peculiar competition about whose racism is worse. And so what I do in my work is I try to unearth hidden histories and bring them into the present day to help people understand the impact of white British elite going around its colonies, including American colonies, including the Caribbean, and rendering Indigenous people outside of civil society and rendering Africans as non-human in law. And to me, that is the bedrock of anti-Blackness and is the bedrock of what we're dealing with in terms of white supremacy. So it's really important for me to educate, unearth, and highlight Britain's role, because there is this English superiority that is very difficult to navigate. And I think it stems from because we didn't shit where we eat. We did our business elsewhere. And so really shining a spotlight on our role in the harm and the genocide that has been caused around the globe and the impact that that is still having today, and how corrosive British racism is, because again, similar to what Edwin said, there's this, not only is there lack of an opportunity to heal from trauma, there is this powerful, violent denial, lack of acknowledgement, and gaslighting that goes on, and that sometimes, well, it doesn't sometimes, it makes it harder to navigate, and there has been no steps towards any sort of atonement whatsoever. So that's why I'm here, to shine a spotlight on the original colonizers, and to really enjoy hearing more about what my colleagues on the call are struggling with, and some of the things that we share in common and how we can move forward. So thank you for having me.
There was a reason why I held back, because I knew I needed to hear what Brother Edwin and Letitia and Nova needed to say, because I think when we try and work with this idea of white supremacy and white body supremacy, many times I'm so glad this has gotten brought together in a global context, because many times what ends up happening is that the oppressor ends up saying they mistake difference from distinction, right? And even though white body supremacy may be distinct in different areas, the difference is negligible, right, in terms of its impact, right? And so to hear my brothers and sisters talk about this idea of white body supremacy in a global context and putting it and not making it about, well, the way that white body supremacy functions here means that it is a different white bodies. No, it is the same. There are distinctions, but it is the same. It is designed. It is not a coincidence that wherever we are, the Black body is seen as not human, right? The darker you are, the less human you are. Now, the European didn't just decree that. They developed a science around that. They developed an economic structure around that. They developed a social science structure around that. And so what that has done is that it has brutalized our peoples from the start of it all the way up until now. And so our children are impacted by this. We are impacted by this. The fact that we're talking about this in a global context, we're talking about pigmentocracy in a global context. And for those of you that don't know what pigmentocracy is, it is the very hierarchical concept that you can tell who is human or who is more human and who is not based on pigmentation. And then you imbue that understanding with the power to rape, to brutalize, to hang, to land theft, to colonize, to imperialize, to genocide, to enslave. Those pieces get woven in South Africa, get woven into England, get woven into Mexico, get woven into the islands, get woven into Canada. And so the beautiful thing about what we're doing right now is beginning to kind of take a higher level, or leveling up a little bit and saying, okay, people, regardless of where you are at, this idea of pigmentocracy runs through your education. And if you think it doesn't, it just means that you haven't interrogated it enough. That's all it means, because there is no, what Sister Nova said about shitting where they eat, right? That the 5 superpowers, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, France, and England, those some of them shit where they eat and some of them did not. And but the impact of that of wherever they went, seeing that any indigenous body that was there, and whether that indigenous body is in North America or in South Africa, that indigenous body, if it could not be worked to death, must be genocided and eliminated. And then the darker bodies must then be used as a part of the profit ledger, right? That runs all the way through. So when I hear brother Edwin talk about what's happening in South Africa and how you have 10% of white bodies, this is why I say that white body supremacy is not about a privilege. If you were born in a white body in this structure, it is not just a privilege, it is an advantage to be born in a white body. It is not a privilege, it is an advantage. And we have to understand that as we begin to talk about this idea of globalization of white body supremacy, we have to, I believe, really help our people understand that the distinction and difference are that they are not the same things. And many times the white power structure wants us to be confused and gaslit around, okay, there's a little distinction over here in England, but Black bodies are being murdered in the street in England also, right? Black bodies are being burnt by police, right? And so I think us beginning to kind of lift this up a little bit and begin to work with this as the global infrastructure that it is, as opposed to thinking that when somebody comes up with a distinction, we get all enamored with the distinction and go down that rabbit hole, as opposed to understanding that that distinction really carries no difference.
Thank you. So rich, so overwhelming how much richness is in this. And I really appreciate that the emphasis in two places. And one is that it circulates globally. And so we have to change our question from if it circulates here or doesn't circulate here to how does it circulate here? And that's on each and every one of us. You know, as a white progressive who has presented my work in many, many other countries, there's a really strong pull to say, but it's different here, but you don't know it here. You know, we don't have the history that you have. I had the honor of being invited to South Africa and spending time with Edwin and the Social Justice Agency and doing that work there. I saw the same dynamics, you know, the same outcomes. And that's a place where we can be unique and special, you know, and claim the so-called difference in our cultures is simply, so what does it look like here, right? And what is my role in that? I think sometimes when we have a talk called white supremacy, a lot of white people think we're going to talk about the extremes, and the extremes are serious and they're growing, and white supremacy is networked across countries, right? It's very serious. And each and every one of us participates in it. And when we focus on white nationalism and extremists, then we can exempt ourselves. So when you were talking about anti-Blackness and its connection to pigmentocracy and shadeism, or whatever term, right? I was thinking about myself as a white person, how I got that same message, but in a subtly way, but a very powerful way, just by having curly hair. I was connected to Black people. My father suggested that my father, that my real father was, he used the N-word, that was hiding. He reinforced another narrative about how my mother became pregnant with me. I mean, this was a throwaway joke that my father made about me, just with that tiny association with my hair. So what does that do for me internally, right? Not only does it connect shame to Blackness, but it connects me to want to separate myself from Blackness. I'm not telling that example to be a victim, but to show that we've all got it. We've all got it, and we have to just really look past the obvious stuff. I mean, in a way, it was obvious what he said. He was explicit, but the impact was more implicit on me. And it's translated into my relationships and my life, my fears, my lack of fears, who I'm drawn to, who I'm not drawn to. That is the work of excavating, I think, within each and every one of us, our internalization of white supremacy.
Thank you, Robin. That was, thank you for just sharing your personal story around that. I'm sure that if we go around, we all have different kinds of stories around that puts us either closer to Blackness or separate further from Blackness. And as someone that was raised in the Caribbean, in the Dominican Republic, you know, a colony of Spain, and sharing the island of what was originally Quisqueya, which is now called Hispaniola, and then it's Dominican Republic, but we share the island, the whole island was shared with Haiti, you know, and having Haiti on the other side was like always having like your, the other side that pointing at, like they're in the trouble that they're in because they are Black. You you know, because they're Blacker, because they still have roots to Africa.
Yep.
They still practice rituals and drummings and cultural practices that are still very connected to East Africa.
Yep.
And that's part of it. But so Dominicans very early on were taught to separate.
Yeah.
To separate. So we even the category in the passports would not say, they would never say like you're Black or a Black heritage. It would be a canela, cacao, India, all of these names that were just like approximating like different tones.
Yep.
So as not to say that you're basically of Black descent, you know. And my family in particular, we grew up in an area that was the sugar growing area in the Dominican Republic, which is where the people of Africa, when they were enslaved and came across, were brought to that area to grow sugar for, you know, other parts and to be exported to Europe. So all around my community, we were, you know, really Black people, and we still practice a lot of cultural practices from East Africa. But to claim your Africanness was to put yourself and your family at peril.
Yeah.
I remember when Aristide was voted in as president, and people in Haiti had a new hope, and there was a lot of organizing, the collusion that happened with the Dominican government to expel Aristide, and not only expelled him, but then to gather all of the people of Haitian backgrounds in the Dominican Republic and dump them in the capital of Port-au-Prince to create pressure so that that government would not succeed, right? And when I would stand up, they would look at my hair and say, because Dominican women, I said, Dominican women, I had to straighten my hair and be in the salon all the time trying to get my hair straight. And I refused that because I'm a fighter, right? So I started having my locks very early on before it was fashionable, right? And they said, what are you doing with your hair? Are you trying to be Haitian?
Yeah.
So that would be the thing, is at that point, see, trying to be Haitian. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for letting me share that and for sparking that in me, Robin.
You know, when I was listening to you, Sister Victoria, the two words popped into my head, and it was octoroon, quadroon, and mulatto, right? This is what I talk about, the difference in distinction and difference, right? Is that you just described the very thing that my people here in America have had to kind of begin to purge, right? This idea that on the plantation and in the world, there was a whole rubric set up around who was more human compared to who was more white, or who was closer to white, and that there was real power and control put around those pieces, right? And the reclamation, this is one of the things that I think is beautiful about the work that we're trying to do, is that we understand that as Black people, as people of African descent, we understand that the idea of reclaiming who we are is a murderous idea. It isn't for us to say that I am going to not perm my hair, or I am going to not whiten my skin, or I am going to reclaim my connection that this structure tried to rape and beat out of me. I'm going to reclaim that. That is a murderous proposition. People will murder you, and people that look like you will murder you because of that, because of the insidiousness of white body supremacy. And I think the work that we're trying to do is begin to slow things down. This is why I start with the body, to begin to slow things down so people can begin to interrogate and unhook all of those urges to align things back to white body supremacy. All of those urges it is not a defect in our peoples. this thing was designed, like when people say that the system is broken, I always say the system is not broken in South Africa. The system is not broken in England. It is not broken here. It was designed to operate and do exactly what it is doing. And if we keep thinking that it's a broken system, we'll miss opportunities to bring any enlightenment into our people by having them begin to slowly reclaim those pieces. Begin to work with the shame that the racialized shame and trauma that is associated with being in these bodies, and stop genuflecting to identity or nationality only as a way to explain what is happening to our people.
Yeah, you've got your finger on the pulse, Resmaa, so clearly. I've been thinking as I listened to Victoria and then to you, Resmaa, how the concept of Mexico as a Black country, right, is really alien. It doesn't fit, right? And yet, we had 3 centuries of Spanish rule with continuous forced migration of people from Africa through enslavement, probably 200, 400,000. One piece of data that I found is that by the early 1600s, Mexico had a larger African population than any other country in the continent.
Oh, wow.
Right? Africans outnumbered the Spanish population until about 1810. And the African population was distributed all through the country and worked in many industries, and, became absolutely the third strand in the braid. But how did all of that become invisibilized? Well, one element is what I think you pointed to. And I want to share an image, but please cloak up. It's a difficult image, I think, to watch, to look at. So if I may, I'm going to share this image. It's a painting of the caste system, the early caste system. I know there's a better way to share this, but I just want to show it to you. And it tells us that, how distinct peoples are found to be more or less close to that standard of human, right? Here's mestizo, the first one, and then it keeps changing to castizo. If you're castizo and español, then you're español. Mulato, morisco, chino, salta atrás, skip back, lobo, wolf, and on it goes. All of these mixes, an attempt to classify from how close to how far each person might be from that standard. This caste system was attempted, and it could have taken complete hold were it not for the mestizaje project, which actually was a stronger effort to invisibilize, right? Because what took hold was this other category called mestizaje that incorporated everyone who was not Spanish or purely indigenous. And that meant that the African root was folded, and invisibilizing and denying the history, including all of the features that could signal, as Robin said, that could signal African ancestry. That gets incorporated. Your hair could be more chino. Check out the word, chino. More orizo, right, to indicate texture. And that, because that shows up within a family, then it's incorporated into mestizaje. So anything to avoid pointing to Africa, right? Anything to avoid no association to our grandmother that might be more African appearing. And so this invisibilizing is a continued harm, a continued violence to dispossess people of our own history and to invisibilize and hope to eradicate visibly African people from our country. And that is beginning to change, but I want to stop there and invite others to make connections.
Yeah, I have a thought here. I've been thinking a lot about white women. Because I do think that white supremacy issues out of patriarchy. It's relatively new in relationship to patriarchy. On the one hand, we see a lot of explicitly expressed contempt for white women, Karens, which I'm getting less and less comfortable with. It is not that Karen doesn't play a role, but who isn't getting looked at, and so forth. And I'm just wondering for folks' thoughts on, given that purity, racial purity is a theme here, and the role that white women play in racial purity, just how you see our place within all of this, the different kind of pulls towards, if even some of what's going on in places like Texas are connected to white women's relationship to racial purity. So I'd love to see if anybody is stimulated by that question.
I'm going to meander a little bit, but there's a chapter in my book called Black Women Are Divine. And I take the reader through the historical significance of white women's role in oppressing Black bodies, and the hierarchy, and how white supremacy and patriarchy are linked. And because white women were oppressed by white men around the time of enslavement and the transatlantic slave trade, no access to property, no access to wealth, couldn't work. But enslaved people were their access to property, access to wealth, access to land. And so they were often gifted enslaved people. And they were also, white women were also in control of correcting enslaved people. And there was laws that made it completely acceptable to inflict horrific violence. So there is this picture painted that white women were innocent damsels in distress. And if you go through the history books, it was anything but that. And so there's something about first acknowledging that and then being able to reconcile that. And so for me, like, it's anything but pure, but it's a part of our history. And that's one of the reasons why I also speak very, very directly to white women, because the way that manifests in today's society is still very violent, emotionally very violent, passive aggressive and manipulative. And we see that in the Karens, or we see that in the Amy Coopers of the world. And that's where it starts from, undermining all of that sort of thing. So that's what came up for me when you shared that, Robin.
Yeah. One of the things, so as I was listening to you, Robin, one of the things that popped into my head is this idea when I talk about how, you know, what white bodies did to indigenous and Black bodies. They perfected on other white bodies first for 1,000 years. So the stuff that, remember, most white bodies that are listening to this call, wherever they're from, they came from people that were fleeing something, right? That fleeing stuff never got dealt with, right? And so by the time poor white bodies were offered at the hands of elite white bodies, offered the idea of being white, right? At some point, being white, being in alignment with elite white bodies, first time in history, right? That just being something would align you with that power structure. I think it's very important. And I think we have a tendency to let white women off the hook simply by saying that patriarchy also exists. It absolutely exists. But the very ceiling that white women are trying to break through in terms of white men, they're literally standing on the floor that Black women are under, right? And this idea of plantation politics has woven and cast itself through every interaction. So this idea of purity is very important. And white women have ingested this idea of purity. They expect the system to respond to their distress in extreme, right? When you watch somebody like a Amy Cooper, or you watch these white women that we call Karens and laugh and stuff like that, but there is a very vicious and feral piece to that, right? That white women expect the structure to save them from the indigenous brutes, from the black brutes, from the black women. And this is why I always say that the race question in this country is a species question first. It is, and yes, patriarchy is important, but there are plantation patriarchy that created this hierarchy that white women benefited from. If their husbands owned plantation, or their uncles owned plantations, or their daddies owned plantations, or their sons owned plantations, they had access to that wealth at the same time that they were being brutalized. Shit rolls downhill. And so for me, the idea that white women can now extricate themselves through self-declarations, right? I declare that I'm an ally. I'm declare that I'm against white body supremacy, without the cultural work that it takes to purge the bullshit that they've ingested, I think is a misnomer. We can't start a movement in terms of eradicating white body supremacy by all of a sudden saying, okay, certain people can opt out because they have been oppressed, or the identity, they identify a different way. That is I mean, even if we look at how things lay out now, you know, white women, because they are quote unquote minorities, still take advantage of the carnage that white men exhibit every day. And so for me, when I heard you ask that question, Robin, what popped into me was this piece around, if I can, in my black body, I cannot build escape hatches for white women, because for me, if I do build those escape hatches, what ends up happening is that the white body supremacy ends up coming up in a way that I hadn't anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. I there's so many things everybody's talking and it's hitting me, and I need to respond, and I hope that I'm gonna give something that fits what I heard. I want to agree with my brother Resmaa, as he was saying, that this thing is systematic and it works as a system. So if we understand the system and it's institutionalized, so it replicates and it metamorphoses. Whatever we bring to the table to change it, it just changes into something else that continues to oppress.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is why it is important for us to have this global connection, so that we pick up faster how it metamorphoses, so that we can interject and stop that from happening. And that is one way of stopping this white body supremacy, especially in this global context. Interesting, Leticia, Africans were taken from Africa, distributed across the world as slaves to work in those countries. And today, it's so difficult for us to travel to all these countries where our people live, where our people were the main tools that build those structures that are in place today. And yet we are labeled the lazy, the ugly, the useless people of this world. And yet we have contributed so significantly. I always say the following thing. I think Robin might remember that I also said this when we were together in South Africa. If I were to be fully oppressed under a system of colonialism or apartheid or segregation, I want to be oppressed as a white woman. Because the way they are viewed today as victims, but with all the privilege that they lived with under those times, I do not view them in the same way. I believe that they might have suffered some form of abuse under patriarchy, but I too believe 100% that they were the beneficiaries of the privileges that came with that oppression. And even in today, we see this is a narrative that is continuously being used, even in South Africa. White women are given superior positions in society ahead of black people, ahead of black men, because of that connotation that is made that they suffered with black people. And that need to stop. We need to stop feeding that nonsense that they had the same suffrage as black people had in South Africa or across the world, because they played a significant role in that oppression. And finally, I would say, I believe that they play now in our in our struggle for justice and racialized justice. I believe that white women play a significant role in undoing the oppression that we continue to face, because they are at the forefront of living and engaging daily with the oppressor, male oppressor that refused to listen to reason. And therefore, I think they should play a significant role in undoing this white supremacy or white body supremacy that we struggle across the world. And I think I would put that responsibility on them. Instead of enjoying the fruits of a falsehood under the pretense that you suffered under apartheid or under segregation or colonialism, you should be advocating for the equal rights of black people across the world as white women.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you, Edwin. I actually want to stop talking about white women for a minute. Just do that for a little bit. Because, you know, I was kind of really grooving on the conversation that Leticia brought up around Black people being all over Mexico. And that was sparking in me the fact that actually Black people were traveling the globe, traveling the globe before the European colonizers.
Right.
Right. But they were doing that as trading partners.
Right. Right.
Right. And so it isn't until after the invention of the guns and gunpowder that then we start seeing the brutality, right, of the colonizers and the five beasts that you mentioned, Resmaa, which I just wanted to bring out I just started seeing the film by Mr. Peck on the kill. I couldn't. I mean, I just started and I had to like stop and go and cry and twist and turn and try to like digest all of that. So I'm just trying to, I want to just bring something back here, because we're trying to see all of these different pieces as a way to get a handle on this so we can metastasize, so it doesn't metastasize, so we can digest it.
Yeah, metabolize.
Metabolize it. We're trying to metabolize all of these different pieces. And so I just wanted to add that. I wanted to add that to the mix.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you're sparking another layer of that in me. And I love this, that the opposite of metastasized racism is metabolized white supremacy, white body supremacy. That seems really appropriate way to think about it. I think this centering, recentering and centering project that I think came out, this is what you've brought to us, Victoria and Edwin, is this impulse. So I want to anchor back in Mexico for a moment that in 2020 was the first time that Black people could identify as Afro-Mexicans on the census. Take that in.
Wow.
2020, the first time that self-identified Black population in Mexico will be counted. It is some kind of progress, right? Absolutely not enough, because the last time they were counted was 1810. And at that time, we were looking at 10%, and it was completely distorted. So the number of people with African ancestry is very high. Some of the things I looked at suggest that the number of Mexicans that are not recent Mexicans, but that have been in Mexico, that have that carry African ancestry is above 90%. So my father was born in Veracruz, right? And it is thought to have one of the largest populations of self-identified Afro-Mexicans who actually escaped enslavement early on and successfully resisted captivity, along with there are other states as well in the Costa Chica, including Oaxaca and Guerrero, that have such communities. One community called the Yanga community was established in 1570 by people who had been previously enslaved and who resisted Spanish interference in unity with indigenous communities for at least 40 years of really strong resistance. And that produced a consciousness which can still be felt all around the Costa Chica. So Afro-Mexicans actually made up the core of the soldiers engaged in the independence war. There was an ejército, an army called the Ejército Moreno, dark-skinned army under Miguel Hidalgo, that is said to have initiated the independence struggle. And General Vicente Guerrero, right, became the country's second president after independence, a Black man. When do you read that in the history
I've never heard that.
Right? You don't hear it because it's invisibilized. There's, anywhere in Mexico that you travel, you're going to come across streets that are called Guerrero. Guerrero means warrior, right? It's the last name of this person. It's not because of the warriorship. It's because of his Blackness and the way that his Black excellence was brought to bear on the independence process. So there are a lot of such stories that are prominent, but with the Blackness pulled back. So this is a dimension of liberation that we can begin to reclaim as late as the year 2021. But it is time.
Right. Whew. When I was listening to Brother Edwin, one of the things that came to me is that, when the Europeans started the Atlantic slave trade or enslavement trade, I had somebody say this to me recently, and it totally changed the kind of way I approach the work now. And that is that they said, remember, when the Europeans started to enslave Africans, they did not enslave slaves. They enslaved farmers, doctors, midwives, scientists, people who understood the weather. You understand what I mean? And that totally changed kind of like the way that I think about this. They did not enslave slaves. The brain drain and the wealth drain was deliberate. And so when they enslaved Africans and then brought them to the plantations, those Africans knew the land. They were intimate with the land. They could smell things and see things and experience vibratorily things. That's why the enslavement thing was so profitable, right? It wasn't just the labor in terms of the physical labor. It was also the brain drain and the usurping of the intellectual knowledge of the African, right? And then utilizing it for their profit. We can't forget that they did not enslave slaves. They enslaved engineers and scientists and all these people and farmers. That's what enabled particularly in America, that's what enabled the profit to be reaped so heavily, was because you had a knowledge base that you could not develop, right? You had to export it. You had to do this in order to get people from West Africa that came over, from interior Africa that came over, and then you utilize their intellectual prowess in order to create profit.
Nova, tell me, girl, jump in here. You're in the land of those people. Come on.
Yeah, and you know what? I feel the vibe of being in the land of these people. It's so corrosive. It is so corrosive to my body and my sense of being and my mental health. I remember a colleague who does racial justice work and looks young enough but is old enough to have played a firm role in living during apartheid and marching and being imprisoned for her activism in South Africa, and now lives in the UK. And she says all of that to say the most corrosive racism she has ever experienced is here in the UK. And it's because of all of that extraction of knowledge, of ideas, of life force, and that exploitation. And it is, you know, I don't have the words at the moment. It is very difficult to navigate. And the reason why I don't have the words at the moment is because I'm right at the end of my book tour and I have never felt so extracted from. Never felt so extracted from.
Sis,
yeah.
how are you taking care of yourself? Who's wrapping their arms around you? Who's checking in on you? Because these book tours can be draining, but I'm really asking this, who's checking on you?
Donna, who worked with Supremacy, who you have worked with, Victoria. So we do a lot around ancestral healing and spirituality. We have sessions every week. I'm working on trauma with an EDMR therapist weekly. You, Resmaa, my sisters, like I'm pulling in every resource I have. And I'll be honest, it's really tough. The industry does not think about dark-skinned Black women. I will preface that. They do not think about me writing a book about navigating white supremacy and the impact of that in having to speak about it, in having my personal experiences of racial trauma dissected, of having a majority white team who are not engaged in anti-racism work and then struggling to receive boundaries from me as a Black woman. And so
come on
that extraction is in the fabric of the DNA of England and the UK, and I feel it.
Well, let me just say this, and you already know what I'm getting ready to say. You got to remember, you are not defective. This whole shit is designed to make you think that you're fraudulent, right? You are not. You are not. Okay? I'll be glad when you get off this damn tour. I'll be glad when you can lay down, and close the door and weep and cry and wail and do whatever you need to do with your ancestors. But I need you to know this ain't on you. You ain't done nothing wrong. Nothing.
Thank you.
Leticia, can I invite you to bring a song in, honey? Bring a song. Bring a song.
Lay it all down. 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 You don't have to carry it no more.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you, Nova, for speaking the truth. This work is painful. It brings up the grief. We need to cry it out, release it from the bones, because this is so deep entwined in us. But as Resmaa says, you're not alone. You're not alone. Not only do we have all of us that are here in this panel, but we have all of us that are here together on this call. So when we come together, we're not just listening. We're tuning to each other. We're tuning to the wind, to the earth. And so all of you on this call, I'll ask you to please take some time and resource yourselves. We're going to take about 5 minutes to grab some water, to use the restroom, to step outside if you have a place to step out to, or lay on the ground if you need to, whatever you need to do to resource your nervous system so that when we come back, we can open the wider conversation and we can all be in this conversation with the intention of digesting and transforming this wound that is traveling around the globe like a ghost. When the music starts, we'll be back. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that moment. And just want to just go back a little bit and say, you know, this work, when we engage in doing the work of dismantling white supremacy, we are engaging with a force that is extractive, like Nova said. And that force just permeates everything and is impacting all of us, all of us. So when Resmaa was encouraging and asking Nova how she's taking care of herself, it goes for all of us. Because I've been right there, Nova. I know that. And especially some of us that are moving a lot of white spaces. You know, the extractive nature, I'm just trying to help, you know, that just comes in there to undermine, to distort everything that can possibly happen so that they don't have to look at themselves and do the work. So dealing and working with our trauma, you know, and look in the generational trauma, and then bringing in all the other ways that we can, like you were listing off the different ways that you try to take care of yourself. It's right now, especially during these times, I think even more than ever, but I'm sure it was. I mean, I heard stories from friends that when those people were coming on the boats, they were doing their practices. Okay. So now more than ever before, and back again, we really need to up our practices. Because if we don't, we're creating more chaos, right? And then we'll just be another, what in Spanish they call gabazo, which is when you chew the sugar cane and you take all the juices out and all you have is the husk. That's the gabazo. That is what white supremacy does to Black bodies. That's why they cannibalize the culture, right? The music, the painting, the dance, they try. And you, my dear Nova, you're a beautiful, beautiful Black woman. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think I want to open it now for question and bring other folks into this. So if anyone has something they want to share, any question you want to address to a particular person, please, let's put it in the chat.
Victoria, there's one that was asked about my opening statement.
Yes.
Somebody asked for some clarity on the truth and reconciliation that took place in South Africa. And the person that was speaking in the chat box was saying that the truth and reconciliation is held up across the world as the standard of healing that took place in South Africa. And therefore, what I am saying in terms of my people being traumatized doesn't sound right to that person because of the truth and reconciliation. So let me start off by saying that the truth and reconciliation was a cosmetic attempt at pardoning white supremacists for their hate crimes on black bodies. And the victims and families who were impacted by the deeds of those white bodies were never given true healing. Some of them never even found the bodies of their family members to bury. They never got an opportunity to bring closure to that. And therefore, the truth and reconciliation was an attempt at healing and healing the trauma of the oppression that our people went through. But it did not materialize. And therefore, we are still divided. We are still fighting. We are still a hurt people trying to heal while fighting the injustices of oppression that left us with poverty. So when you need to worry about the next piece of bread that you need to have, that's the type of poverty we're dealing with. It's impossible to heal from the trauma, intergenerational trauma from slavery, colonialism, and apartheid, and currently from the class system that continues to oppress our people, because that system is so flawless. As I said earlier, while it metamorphoses into something new, black people have been so um, our brains, our functioning of our brains have been so damaged that even in and amongst ourselves, when we're supposed to unite to fight together, we come up with ways to divide, because that's how the system taught us and socialized us to be anti-black, even within ourselves.
Yes.
So we have to understand that some of these cosmetic practices that was brought forward did nothing to heal what is broken, and we're still on that journey. And therefore I made that statement that I would like to learn from my brothers and sisters across this global space how we can do it better, because we don't have necessarily the resources, the opportunity, and the infrastructure that you have in a first world country like the ones you come from.
Brother Edwin, can I say something, piggyback on that? I think when you said, and I'm so glad you said it the way that you said it, when you said cosmetic, that what was called healing, right, is really not healing. Healing involves repair, right? Healing involves enough of a like if you like Malcolm said, if you slam a knife in my back and you pull it out 4 inches, that's not progress. If you pull it out 6 inches, that's not progress. If you pull it all the way out, that's not progress. It actually has to heal. You actually have to give it time. Things have to work. I have to be sure that you're not going to plunge it into my back again. And what did not happen as a result of the truth and reconciliation was a contending with the historical charge, the intergenerational charge, the persistent institutional charge, and then our own personal charges that come with 400 and 500 years of brutalization. There is literal charge to this trauma that we have not contended with. And so all you have to do is listen to what you said at the beginning. Brother, 10% of the population runs the country. That's it. To decide whether or not truth and reconciliation worked, all you have to do is ask that question: who is in power before it started, and who is in power after the process that you put in place. And this is the insidiousness of white body supremacy. So thank you for saying what you said, that what happened in terms of truth and reconciliation was not repair or reparations, right? It was cosmetic. And it did exactly what it was designed to do. And that's let some white folks feel comfortable about being so horrible.
Thank you, Resmaa. Let me ask a question, bring a question from one of my question is, what are your recommendations for resisting and rising up alongside our healing individually and collectively as a global movement? Do you want me to repeat the question, or you guys, you got it?
I have a few thoughts.
Robin, you can hear you.
Oh, can you?
Now we can. Great.
Many, many thoughts. I'm thinking about what Lillian Smith, who was a white abolitionist in the 40s, she wrote Killers of the Dream. She called the bargain between Mr. Rich White and Mr. Poor White. You know, Mr. Rich White said to Mr. Poor White, you know, I have to exploit you. I need your body. I need the resources, but I will give you always to be above the Black man, right? It's the bargain we talked about struck with white women, right? And it's the bargain that allows all of those divisions and in the continual adaptation, right? And I'm thinking about Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, where she really makes the case of how we all lose. And I don't tend to focus on, in my work directly, you know, what white people lose. I think that the hardest thing for us is to sit with what we have gained, but also at what cost, right? The cost to our humanity, the moral trauma of our guilt. And yet, if we could see our shared interests, we would not be able to be manipulated continually through racial animus that has gotten us no universalized medicine in the US, no shared education, just this consistent, you know, continual robbing of all of us, because white people have not looked at the internalization of white supremacy and what it has cost them. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Robin. That was definitely very pointed. Anyone else want to add anything to that or get the next question? Okay.
I think there's one for Letitia. The Laurel Smith says, thank you for all this deep learning. My question is, how shall we think about Blackness in Mexico now?
Okay. Yeah, and I think there might be a element of response here for the other question as well. So lest anybody start to imagine that all is moving in a really great direction in Mexico or anywhere else, I want to say that in 2005, the Mexican government commissioned the first ever national survey on discrimination. Guess what? It did not include anything about the experience of dark-skinned or Black people, right? So African presence in contemporary Mexico is still denied, trivialized. There's still caricaturization. There's still ridicule, stereotypical representations in the media. That is all still rampant. There's a program called the Third Root Program that is addressing this and attempting to work with it. There is a Black Lives Matter movement at the border, primarily made up of people who are Afro-Mexican as well as immigrants from Black countries. Because the U.S. Asylum system failure has created another community, another Black community at the border, which then also has brought on additional persecution of Afro-Mexicans by immigration police. So the hope I want to invite you to think about when you think about Blackness in Mexico is that there are efforts and there are activists working to confront racism, brutality by police and other state-sponsored violence. And in the states where there is a stronger presence, there are organizations that are reclaiming the word negritud, blackness, so that you are hearing it and reading it much more. There is movement now to recognize the contributions of Afro-Mexicans in the formation of Mexico and throughout the history of Mexico in all arenas and professions. And so one way that you could begin to think about Blackness in Mexico is to listen with that ear for the third root or the third braid. When you hear La Bamba, what do you think you're hearing? Right? So Afro-Mexican music is Mexican music. And it is throughout all of the art, throughout all of the cultural strength, where there is stamina and resilience, where there is community construction that is enduring, you're going to see that third root. So listen for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Leticia. Let's see. Did you see, I don't see another question right now.
I can see one that says how black bodies are expected to continue to show up. Is that a question or a statement? I'm not sure.
Let's take it as a question, shall we?
Question. How are black bodies expected to continue to show up as if the environment is safe when we know in our bodies it is not safe?
So for me, this is about emergence. Everything that Leticia just said before about how Blackness is starting to show up is really about emergence. Things are starting to emerge because there's a little bit more room being cultivated by Black bodies, right? And by people who have some understanding of what has happened and what continues to happen. And so what you're starting to see is these kind of sprouts that are starting to see. You could just see the tip of the green coming through the skin of the seed, right? It's not even through the dirt yet. It's just you're just starting to begin to see these pieces, and that's because of what Black people have been doing, like what happened to George Floyd and reverberated around the world, right? And so for me, the Black people, let me say this to Black people, you are not expected to show up if you can't and you don't want to show up. This is not your job to do. What you do is begin to reclaim and cultivate a living, embodied anti-racist culture, so you can begin to extricate those parts of white supremacy, pigmentocracy that we've breathed in for survival's sake, right? And so what we have to begin to do as Black people is rest. We have to rest. I've watched my mom and my grandmother just like override everything in order to get stuff done, right? Override their own emotional stakes, override their own tiredness and all this stuff in order to get stuff. That is a throwback to plantation stuff, right? And so it is revolutionary for a Black woman to rest, right? If we start to cultivate resting in the Black community, I believe this shit will change. If we start to say, you get to lay down, you get to rest, you get to allow your body to pause and not being ground to death, right? There's a reason why Black men die 6 or 7 years earlier, because this stuff grinds us to death. And so for me, Black bodies that are listening to this, if you are tired, stop. Let the quaking happen. Allow yourself to deal with the uncomfortableness of stopping, dealing with the historical pieces of that, the intergenerational pieces of that, the persistent institutional pieces. Black people do not have post-traumatic stress disorder. We have persistent and consistent and pervasive stress disorder. You must deal with things differently when it is post compared to persistent. Persistent means you have to cultivate a container that allows you to rest, and other people support and push back on the structures that are constantly encroaching on your Black body. So for me, this idea of emergence is so important right now in terms of Black bodies.
Wow, thank you for that, Brother Resmaa. That's really important that we hear you very loud and clear on this point. I think it's critical. Nova, there's a question for you. I know that you wanted to say something to that statement. I'll ask the question and then you can do both. The question is, what hope do you have, if any, for addressing white body supremacy and racism, as well as colonialism in the UK? Where do you see resilience and resistance? And as a racialized Brit, the current climate, Brexit, and more feels like the country is spiraling.
Okay. Let me start with just piggybacking onto what Resmaa said about rest. So I come to the end of my book tour next week, and it will be, well, it feels like forever, but it's been 6 weeks. And I made a decision early on that I would take a 3-month sabbatical. So now we're getting close to it, where people are like, what? My team are like, what happens if you get a press interview? What happens if you get this? What happens if you get that? I said, I'm on sabbatical. That means I'm unavailable. And I've just written my out of office. And it basically says I'm doing the opposite of what is expected of Black women, and I am resting. And I will not be checking my emails until the 1st of February. I will not be responding to them. If you email me during this time, please resend them on the 1st of February, because I will not be coming back and spending hours and hours going through emails. And I said, white supremacy isn't going anywhere. It will be here when I get back. So even that feels radical, but it is necessary for me to continue to maintain my well-being and my sense of humanity and my life force. So it is about sitting with that discomfort, that fear of not getting a job, that fear of becoming irrelevant, that fear of not doing enough, that fear of not being good enough because you're not producing, and just being with that. So second part of the question, what hope do I have? Well, I have run an online anti-racism course called Becoming Anti-Racist with Nova Reid since 2018. And I haven't looked at stats because it's all been book tour, but I've had about 200 plus people go through that course. And, you know, there will be some people who just tick a box and do it. There are others that have brought it and have never logged on. And there are a core component of people from all over the world who are leaning in with full gusto. And I have to say the majority of those are white women. And the hope I have is seeing how they're showing up in the world and how that is impacting not only me in terms of how they're paying it forward to support the work that I do, but how they're calling other people in. And one in particular is a teacher, and it's Black History Month here in the UK. And she said, in all of the 12 years of my teacher training, I have never learned as much as I have about Black history as I have through doing work with you. And she's in a position of influence. So she's then brought that into the curriculum. And it's not just about enslavement and trauma and inferiority. It's about the inventors. It's about resistance. It's about the warrior women. It's about people like Queen of Kingston. And she's embedding that in the curriculum throughout the year, and that is reaching other teachers and other students. And so for me, the hope is that we're planting seeds, and we might not see them all come into fruition, but I have hope because I see that it works when people become the work, when it doesn't become something that they've just got in their brain, when it's every day, it's embodied, they're showing up, they're leaning into shame. I see it working. And there's not nearly enough of people doing it, but the ones who are leaning in with full gusto, it works.
Thank you, Nova. Resmaa, do you want to say anything?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm hearing Sister Nova say is this thing about, and she's heard me say this 1,000 times, but your people, your community are not the people you start with. It's the people you end with, right? Everybody, when you're talking about this stuff, is rah, rah, sis, boom, bah at the beginning. Everybody's like, yeah, let's do it. I want to change the world and all that shit, right? And then some of them don't even sign on. And then some of them got critiques about how you doing it as a Black person and how they think they should be, how it should be going, and you should, and you should be more inclusive than you should, right? All of that shit, right? And then you sitting here feeling like I'm giving everything that I got and it still ain't enough, right? But what I'm hearing you say is that there's a small group, a small contingent of people who stay, and those are the people that you will begin to develop a culture with, a living embodied anti-racist culture creation, not just people who know shit, right? And I think this idea of, like, when you said you put your thing that said don't contact me, send it back later, when I'm done taking care of me. There is white supremacy, white body supremacy. There's two components to it that's traumatizing. It is urgency and stuckness at the same time. That's the texture of it, right? And so it's this, so that urgency makes you think I got to do something, and then you're stuck. I mean, there's almost like a running your wheels in mud type of piece, right? That is the charge. That is the white body supremacy charge showing up literally in the body. And so if, as Black people, and specifically Black women, as they begin to reclaim those pieces in short pieces, in short stops, in ways that they put boundaries up, the white body is not used. The white body is so used to having full and unfettered access to the Black body, right? They're so used to it that they don't even understand how much they've been affected by that. There has been no inquiry as to, I expect deference from those bodies, and when it doesn't show up, here's the ways that shows up in me. And it is why I believe, as Black women continue to set those boundaries, continue to rest, continue to, this thing will begin to shift and change. But it is not on the Blacks of Black women to shift and change this shit for other people. It is not. I'm saying this for Black women because I love Black women, right? And I want Black women. It was why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. I want to create enough room so my daughter don't pick up this shit and override her beauty in order to serve me or serve some man or some woman or whoever it is, but that she knows I can rest, and that's a possibility. So.
Thank you, Resmaa. Thank you, Resmaa. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Robin, and then Robin, you're going to turn it over to Leticia, because speaking of time and urgency, right? We need like a whole day, if not a whole week, of doing this together, because there's so much that we have to tell each other. There's so much we have to. Robin, come on, girl, talk to me. Let's talk about white people. How can white people like put their skin in the game here and help all of us out?
But first, I'm going to assume, Nova, that the vast majority of those white people who extracted what felt like the life force out of you were white progressives. They were not white nationalists.
100%.
Okay. That's true. All right, white progressive. Did you hear that? Assume it's you. Assume it's me. Change your question from if it's you to how is it you? I am sometimes critiqued for not addressing structures. People make up structures. if you don't change the consciousness of each individual, you don't change the structures. And so to do less harm is not small. For me, in relationship to you, Nova, to do less harm might be one more hour on your life that I didn't drain away through my extractive patterns. So from if to how, and do less harm. And Leticia.
Yeah, I was, when the question came earlier, I think the thing that's most in focus for me about white folks, white women in particular, is this fearful passivity that activates fear of something vague that interrupts the ability to step up and step in and engage. And then I think this may be my last statement. So I just want to leave you with one more little song. And it goes like this. Remember to remember, remember to remember.
Thank you.
Remember. Let's do another round, Leticia. Let's do another round.
Remember to remember. Remember to remember.
Thank you,
I'm a
Leticia.
mute.
Nova was
y'all
about to say
sing, 'cause
something
y'all
too, I
don't wanna
think.
hear
What
me.
was that, Resmaa? What?
I'm a mute when y'all singing, because y'all don't want me singing.
I can hear you. I can still hear you.
I want to now turn it over to my colleague Edwin to speak, and then we'll do a final closing. If anyone needs to drop off right now, please feel free to do that. But we're gonna just wrap this up well. So Edwin, go for it.
Thank you, Victoria. We came back to white women, the conversation returned, and I think it's important that we speak to white people. White people want to hear from us. And we've learned, I think I'm standing right in front of the queue when I say white people shouldn't be doing this on their own. They should listen to us before they act on what they think they should do, because we hold the answer to our problems. You cannot solve my problem just by standing and looking at me. So I want to say, and piggybacking on what Resmaa were referring to with Nova having a small group that returns, I must say there has been a significant growth in the white population amongst white women that have been fighting for social justice and racial justice in South Africa for Black people. And they are continuing to support us in this fight for racial justice. So I want to, for one, say we show a small amount of gratitude to the ones that have come to the fore, and specifically on this platform also for Robin and her contribution to these conversations in bringing white people to the understanding that this is how Black people need you to show up when they need you. Yeah. So that is very important, and we are grateful for that. I want to say this is very important. White people, open all your ears. This is the biggest nugget of gold that I'm going to throw out here tonight. And I want all white people to run with this. Tell your friends, tell your family, put it on Facebook, wherever you go. Do not become complacent in your proximity to Blackness, because that is where we lose the fight for social justice. If you think you've done enough, think again, because it's never enough. Come on. We can never undo the harm that was caused over so many decades and centuries ago. So what you need to do is never feel like you made it, and seek every day to continue this fight, not as the forerunner, but as the ally that commits to helping Black people secure their position in society. So please, thank you for all your hard work, but be mindful that there is no making it in this race. We need you to continue. And as you can hear, we are getting tired. You are continuing to harvest what we have, and we need your help so that we can sustain this fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Edwin. I want to say that when we first started this concept of doing this panel, that Robin and I were having a conversation, and she said, you know, I really want to do this. I want to support Edwin in South Africa and the work that he's doing. Let's get Resmaa. I know Resmaa is on. Let's get Resmaa, and Leticia is on. Let's get Leticia. And she goes, oh, I know someone in England, you know, Nova. And so really, this is the best form of allyship in the way that Robin showed up, in the way that we all show up, the way that you all showed up, and that no one on this panel is getting paid. This is a fundraiser for Edwin's organization, the Social Justice Center in South Africa, and for the Center for Healing and Liberation. And that's another way that you can really show up. You really, you know, as people who might have access to wealth or proximity to wealth or connected to someone with wealth. And by wealth, I don't mean like tons of money. I mean, just a little bit is enough wealth, right? Please donate and give to either our organizations, but also other organizations that you might know about and that are being led by Black and Brown people. Give those money, help them, because that is needed, especially now. We cannot talk about women taking 3 months sabbatical and rest if they don't have the resources to be able to do that. We cannot talk about people getting, you know, what they need, their food, their shelter, all the things that Black and Brown people need in order to be able to be healthy and creative and imagine and heal, unless they have resources, because unfortunately we live in a capitalist system. So tell your friends and give.
That's right.
Resmaa, you were going to say something. I saw you leaning in.
No, I was going to say that. I was going to make sure that that where people could give was in the chat. That's all. And I saw it pop up, so we're good.
Yeah, and I will also send out a follow-up that you can continue to give, and Edwin and I will have a conversation about.
Have we made a decision? I had somebody text me and say, "Is this going to be? Have we decided if this is going to be run again? If people are going to have access to watch this again?"
It seems like all of you said yes. I don't know.
I think we should. I've gotten a couple of texts while we've been here. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then we'll make it available. Okay. And anything else?
No. Victoria, there's
wait. Nova had something to say. Nova, what is it, Nova?
If it at a natural point, I'd really like to read a little part of my book that I wanted to say something about Black women being divine. Yes, and maybe just reading it from my book is the most authentic way.
Go for it.
Is that okay now?
Go for it, Queen. And what if we just say that's going to be the final piece, and then we're going to close with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall I go ahead?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. In a documentary film, Invisible Portraits by Oji Ebunu, Black women were asked to describe Black women in 3 words. Unsurprisingly, what has so often been bestowed upon us came up as an adjective again and again and again: strong. However, one word floored me. One word made my body temperature change, my heart pound, and provoked spontaneous tears: divine. This interviewee paused and with such congruence said, Black women are divine. I think that Black women are the closest that there is on this earth to God. She then paused and became completely overcome. Tears started to fall as she continued. We submit. We are vessels. We are filled. I do not describe myself as religious. I don't go to worship or believe in any one God, but I am deeply spiritual and believe in something greater than all of us. So I had no idea why these words moved me so deeply in a way that felt almost otherworldly. It was only until I discovered something 6 months later, which turned out to not only be healing, but reaffirming. In 1997, Mother Nature had big plans. Extreme and prolonged rainfall in Northern Rift in Ethiopia caused part of the ground to quite literally wash away, exposing several fossils. Scientists, including Dr. Behane Afsfor and paleontologist Tim White, discovered a human skull, thought to be the oldest Homo sapiens to date, which he called Idaltu, meaning the first. Years of cleaning and study by scientists and anthropologists revealed something quite magnificent. Based on the discovery of these fossils, these new scientific breakthroughs and archaeological evidence tie all of us, every single modern human being, together. Evidence reveals humans were on Earth a lot earlier than first thought, and that each of us share a direct maternal ancestral DNA approximately 160,000 years ago from an African woman known as mitochondrial Eve. The DNA was successfully passed down for so many generations from mother to daughter that the mitochondrial DNA survived, of which we now carry in our cells. This groundbreaking evidence shows that all of us, no matter what we look like today, descended from a common ancestor in Africa, a Black woman. I had known this on a surface level, but it didn't land with any congruence until I heard it in a trauma workshop with Resmaa Menakem. It was like being cradled and rocked. Throughout my existence, I have received and been exposed to so much negative programming, so much of which I absorbed and at times, to my shame, turned inwards. For years, I used chemicals linked to causing skin cancer in my hair, chemicals that left scabs on my scalp, all to conform to Eurocentric white beauty standards. I swallowed the racist bile, and I came to believe in the myth of Black people being inferior, and the even bigger myths of the inferiority of dark-skinned Black women, about our place in the world. Violations on our bodies, commandeering of our wombs, policing of our hair, attacks on the essence of who we are, our beauty, our capability, our intrinsic worth. In discovering more about my own ancestry, the hidden histories about the horrors of what Black women were subjected to in the height of slavery and far beyond it, and then this mitochondrial Eve. There is something to be said and acknowledged about what we endured and continue to endure and thrive in spite of. There is something to be said about what we resist, smash through, swallow, or tolerate in order to maintain equilibrium. There is something to be said about the vessels we become in order to survive, in order to love and protect fiercely what seems to be all of our humanity. Black women, I wrote this chapter for you and to 7-year-old Nova, who believed in the myth that she was worthless. Black women are divine.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep listening. Keep acting. Keep contributing. We're in the struggle together.
Love
Bye.
y'all.
Thank you.
Mabuhay Africa. Mabuhay Africa. A luta continue. The struggle continue, my brothers and sisters. Thank you for this evening.
Love y'all. Love y'all.
Lots of love.
Blessings.
Thank you.
Love to y'all. Right.
Thank you, Robin.
Talk to y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Letitia, Resmaa, Eswin,
Yeah.
Robert.